In your own life, when was that big transformation and change for you?
After my father died, I started to ask myself a question I'd never asked myself before. Whose life are you leading? Is it your life or is it someone else's life?
I love that.
And I realized actually, I don't think I'm living my life. How do we move forward in life in a more purposeful way, using the learnings from our past to guide us? I believe that whilst my dad never got to see the things he would have been proudest of the most with me, I also understand that if my dad was alive, I would never be doing any of this. I've got to the place now where I see my father's death as a gift.
What does intelligent change mean to you? Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, welcome to the Intelligent Change podcast.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. As we were saying, we're going to keep it casual, not too formal. We would love to have done it outside, but today it's raining in London, so we're keeping it casual. My first question I want to really dive deep in with you is that you've gone through many changes in your life and also evolutions. What does intelligent change mean to you? What does that represent to you in your life?
Wow, we're going deep right at the start. Intelligent change, what does it represent to me? Those two words are quite interesting, aren't they? Intelligent and change. Change is the natural order of life. So we're always changing and evolving. I think where many people run into problems is when we try and resist that change. But life is constantly changing. And I think the better we get at dealing with change and learning to, dare I say it, love change and embrace change, I think the happier and more meaningful our lives become. So I'm just breaking down the two words. That would be change. Intelligent change would be, well, changing in a smart way, changing by learning from what's happened in the past and actually using your learnings from what's happened in the past, perhaps things that you could have done differently or you didn't do differently, and you maybe wish you'd done differently, that you can then evolve and make better decisions going forwards. A lot of people get consumed by regret, Alex. They think about their past and they think, I wish I'd done that. And they beat themselves up for years over something that happened in the past. And in my latest book, I write about regret as a form of perfectionism. This idea that actually to really have regrets, to me, I'm not saying everyone has to agree with me, but to me, it has this tinge of perfectionism, this idea that I could have made perfect decisions. I could have made the right choice. Well, you couldn't have because you didn't. I choose to believe that we're all doing the best that we can based upon our life experiences and what we know. So when I say regrets are a form of perfectionism, it doesn't mean I can't learn from the past. It means that I can look back on the past and go, oh, that's interesting. When I did this, things ended up like this. If I'm presented with these choices in the future, I'm going to make different decisions now based upon what's happened in the past. So there's a subtle difference. I think regret is tinged with disappointment. I don't have disappointment about the past. There are things that I could have done differently perhaps, or let me rephrase, I will choose to do different things in the same scenario in the future, but I've made peace with the fact that I was always doing the best that I could, and everything that's happened to me in the past has informed my learning and has informed who I am today. So I guess coming back to your question, intelligent change, I guess what I'm saying is that when I hear those two words put together, I think about how do we move forward in life in a more purposeful way, using the learnings from our past to guide us.
I love that. And in your own life, when was that big transformation and change for you that you were able to navigate more with intention? Because sometimes as these changes happen, we are just more reactive. However, we can be more intentional in regards to the things that come in our lives and how do we respond in that way. So is there a time in your life where it was a big transformation, big change, even yourself, like doing your podcast and what you do now? You were a doctor and a physician, but I'm sure there's many other case scenarios where you had to make that intentional change in your life.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's many different ways to answer this because life is a series of changes. And as you say, sometimes these changes are happening and we're not even aware of them. But I guess the big turning point moment, I would say, was back in 2013 when my father died. So a bit of context. My dad was an Indian immigrant to the UK in 1962. He came here as a doctor and he basically worked ridiculously hard to give me and my brother a great start in life and to feed his family back home. Now, Dad got really sick, and I will tell you that was from working too much. Because for 30 years, my father only slept for 3 nights a week. So he was a consultant at Manchester Royal Infirmary. I can still remember this as if it was yesterday, where Dad he would drive to Manchester in the morning on the motorway, maybe 45 minutes drive in traffic, do his day job, come home at around 6 p.m. He'd have dinner that my mum would have made for him. He'd go upstairs, he'd shave, he'd come downstairs, he'd leave the house at 7 p.m. and he would do GP house calls all night. So family practice house calls all night. He'd come home at 7 a.m., have breakfast, go upstairs and shave, and then drive to Manchester and do his day job. So, I mean, I can see from your eyes how amazed you are. I'm amazed now thinking about, as a parent myself, thinking, how did my father do that for 30 years? And so when at the age of 57, 58, my dad becomes unwell, he gets the autoimmune disease lupus, he gets kidney failure. I'm at medical school. My mum calls me saying, your dad's suddenly been admitted to intensive care. The doctors don't think he's going to last the night. I'm like, what's going on? I rush back home. Dad actually does survive, but he spends 15 years chained to a dialysis machine until he finally dies in 2013. And I moved back from medical school. Well, after I qualified, I moved back to where I live now in the northwest of England to help my brother and my mum look after my father. So in 2013, when my dad died, it was probably one of the biggest turning points in my life. Of course, losing a parent is always challenging. But what was really interesting as I reflect back now, Alex, and this relates directly to your question, after my father died, I started to ask myself a question I'd never asked myself before. Whose life are you leading? Is it your life or is it someone else's life? And that's why when you ask me that question, I think about my father, because until then, although I had many frustrations with my career, I had many frustrations over the reactive nature of Western medicine. A lot of it didn't feel right to me. I thought I want to help people get better, but I'm being taught to basically suppress symptoms with drugs. I'm not being taught how to get to the root cause of problems. These things were bothering me, but I didn't do anything with them. I was too busy, frankly, starting my career and looking after my father. But after Dad died, and that was a huge physical hole and emotional hole because I lived 5 minutes away from my dad. I'd see him 3 times a day. So that was the turning point question for me, which in many ways has led to what I'm doing today. Because Dad dying forced me to ask myself these quite uncomfortable questions. And I realized actually, I don't think I'm living my life. I'm doing what was expected of me. I'm sort of living out the conditioning I had as a child. I'm not blaming anyone for that. But I think now if we look at it through the lens of intelligent change, if we look at it through through the lens of intentional living, I don't think I was living really intentionally until my father died. That was that big turning point that led to me starting to make decisions from my heart rather than my head. And it may sound cliched to people, but the truth is, as I see it, once I started making decisions from my heart, that's when things started to change in my life. That's when I got more enjoyment out of my career. That's when I get my own primetime BBC One television series, which goes out to 70 countries around the world in 2015 and 2017. That has led to 6 best-selling books. That has led to, a global hit podcast. All those things are side effects. The goal was never to have any of those things. The goal was to start living my life and following my passion. And to bring this full circle, Alex, I feel today at 48 years old about as good as I've ever felt. I feel really calm, content, happy. I kind of understand my inner world. And I've got to the place now where I see my father's death as a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to be clear, I'm not expecting anyone else to see their parents' death as a gift. This is my view, and I'm entitled to my perspective. I believe that whilst my dad never got to see the things he would have been proudest of the most with me, as an Indian immigrant to the UK in the 60s, to have your son have their own BBC One television show, have 6 best-selling books, be featured in all these newspapers. My God, if my dad was alive, he'd be phoning all his mates, he'd be showing off. He never got to see any of that. But I also understand that if my dad was alive, I would never be doing any of this. A lot of what I have learnt that I share with the world has come from the lessons I got through caring for my dad for 15 years and then the man I became after my dad died. So now I think actually my dad gave this to me as a gift. His death taught me the things that have made me the man I am today and have given me the career that I have today.
Wow. And there's so many things that I personally reflect on this, as well as my father died when I was 18 of cancer. And everything that I'm doing now with intelligent change is actually because of his death. And that was my first introduction really to gratitude. And you might be thinking, how am I introduced to gratitude through my father's death? But in these moments of significant change and also a moment of loss that I've experienced myself as well, I was faced with a choice. Do I see this as a huge hole and loss in my life and something that was taken away from me, something now I don't have? Or can I choose to see this as an opportunity of seeing what I did have, which is a father for even the 18 years of my life, although it may not be perfect, but I had a father. Many people don't have fathers. And also be able to, most importantly, see through death that how special life is. And so what I want to kind of bring this to, and I'm going to ask you questions from this, and this is like I said, impromptu. Here on my coffee table is like our life designer.
Wow.
And what inspired me, when we created this, the first exercise that we take people through in the life designer is going through your lifespan.
Wow.
And there's a brilliant blog post by Wade by Why where he says like your life in weeks and filling out a dot for each week that you live to just understand. We did it just to represent one kind of dot circle to represent 1 year of your life. The reason in this product, the Life Designer, we start with you actually thinking about death, and you've been to our Intelligent Change Summit as well. That's kind of one of the strong themes that we open with, is actually to get you to confront mortality and death. And that seems like that's not intelligent change, that's not gratitude, that's not happy. Why are you making me think about death? However, in the same instance that you faced, and this is the quote that we have by Steve Jobs, remembering that you're going to die is the best way that I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. Because most of us, we play it safe, we play it comfortable. But it's until sometimes life gives us this big shake with somebody dying, and you see, oh my God, it can just all end, and this person's not here with me anymore. That we then wake up to, actually, I want to live life fully.
Yeah.
So the question that we asked, and I want to ask you is, what are the three things that you want to make sure you fulfill, experience, and actualize in your years remaining? I'm sure that those are some of the questions I went through when your father died. And I'm curious, maybe we can start off even, what was it then? Because I'm sure you've actualized a lot of what you set out then. And then if we can move towards the future of what you still want to do with your life and years remaining now.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
it was not, we're going super deep. Not going.
No, I love it. I love it. What's the point of getting together otherwise,
Yeah.
right? I love these sort of conversations. And there's a theme in what you just said in relation to what you just asked me. I'm not really interested in small talk anymore, right? I've done years of small talk. Let's go deep. Let's have these conversations, right? That's what, and that's why I've done my podcast for 8 years.
Yeah.
Because I find after every podcast conversation, I'm energized. Even though I go deep for 2 hours with someone, I'm like, no, this feels great. Like I'm now thinking about the world differently. I'm thinking about myself differently. And there's just so many things I will get to your question in just a moment. But one thing you said, which really rung true in my ears when you said about your father's death, thank you for sharing, first of all. You said, I chose to see it as an opportunity. That word choice is so important. I heard it and it just rang true in me. And it circles back to your first question about what does intelligent change mean to me. Another way of looking at the theme of intelligent change is through the lens of choice. It's you choosing how you want to live, right? It's you choosing how you want to evolve and change. Change is going to happen whether you want it to or not. But can you be the author of that change? Can you choose? And that word, the choice, it's deeply resonant because I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before or not, but one of the most life-changing conversations I had on my podcast was several years ago with a lady called Edith Eger, who was when I spoke to her, she was 93, and when she was 16 years old, was in Auschwitz concentration camp. And, the short version of her story was that she was just a 16-year-old teenager growing up, excited about going for a date with her boyfriend that night, wondering what dress she's going to wear. They got a knock on the door. And before they know it, Edith, her older sister, and her two parents are put on a train to Auschwitz. When they finally get to Auschwitz, within 2 hours, both of her parents are murdered. About 2 hours later, she gets asked to dance for the senior prison guards because she's a 16-year-old young lady who they know is a dancer. And she said to me, Alex, I never forgot the final words that my mother said to me before she was killed. She said, Edith, nobody can ever take from you the contents that you put inside your own mind. So she tells me when I was dancing in Auschwitz, after my parents were murdered, I wasn't dancing in Auschwitz. In my mind, I was dancing in Budapest Opera House. I had a beautiful dress on. There was an orchestra playing. There was a full house. And I remember thinking, this is remarkable. This is a lady, a young lady, a teenage girl who is able to reframe her experience in a death camp after her parents are murdered. And there's many things she tells me in that conversation. But her final words to me, Alex, which I would say have significantly changed my life, were these. She said, Rangan, I have lived in Auschwitz, and I can tell you the greatest prison you will ever live inside is the prison that you create inside your own mind. And her whole message basically is that we always have a choice in any given moment, how we view the situation, what perspective we take on it, whether we reframe it in a positive way or a negative way. And I remember after that conversation thinking, you know what, Rangan? If Edith Eger can reframe every single experience of her life in a death camp, well, you know what? You've got a pretty good life. You've got a good job. You can afford to feed your family and your children. You know what? Things are never as bad as they were for Edith. If she can do it there, you can do it here. So one of the reasons I believe I'm so contented these days is because I know, I really do on a core level understand that all people make pushback on all, most experiences in life are really neutral. It's all about the perspective that we choose to take on them. I've chosen to see my dad's death as a gift to me. You've chosen to see your dad's death as an opportunity. You don't need to. I don't need to. And it doesn't mean that I'm weak or I've made the wrong decision if I choose not to take that perspective. But I think it's a very empowering perspective because it means that actually we're the author of our lives, we're the author of our experience. It's how, you can train yourself to take an empowering perspective on anything. This is not toxic positivity at all. You can accept when things are bad and also understand that, yeah, but what is the silver lining here? What can I learn from this that I would have otherwise not been able to learn? So I just wanted to talk about choice because when you said that, it really, my ears, lit up when you said the word choose. You've also asked me a question
Yeah.
about what was it? Is it 3 things?
Yeah. What are the 3 things that you want to experience, actualize, or create in the years remaining?
Okay, so you asked me initially what was it like after Dad
Yeah,
died,
because
and
yeah,
the funny thing is, I don't think I had all the skills and resources that I have now within me to ask those questions back then. But I guess reflecting back 12 years ago, I just had this overwhelming sense of I now want to live my life. I want to follow my heart. And I think I mostly saw that through the lens of I don't like what I'm doing as a doctor. I don't like the fact that the system is asking me to just prescribe all these drugs, which I know are not helping most people. It can do in some instances, but most of the time, we're just putting sticking plasters on symptoms. I knew that I could get patients better by taking a root cause approach. I was already kind of doing it, but I wanted to throw my heart into that. I go, no, I can't practice like this anymore. I want to go and really learn about the creation of health. I would go around the world, learn from all these experts, sort of put it into my own frameworks and start applying it with my patients. I would say that was my main goal after Dad died. Now, today, as you ask me that question, what do I want to experience? This is really interesting. I haven't thought about this for a while. I think today, what I want to experience is I want to experience presence more and more. And what I mean by that is I could tell you that I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to go to this place. But if I'm doing all those things and I'm not present with where I'm at, if I'm stressing about work emails or things that are going on, then I'm not even doing the things that I say to you I want to experience. So one of my big goals in life at the moment is more and more is to work on presence through meditation, through long, intimate conversations like this one, where the whole world can be doing whatever the world is doing, but all that matters in this moment is that I'm here with you, that I'm actually present with you to listen to what you're asking me and to make sure that my whole experience is here and not anywhere else. So that, I guess, is the foundational thing that I'm looking for more and more at the moment. I want to experience presence. I want to be present with you, with my children, with my wife, with my podcast guests, because otherwise I'm not really experiencing it. So that's quite a big picture look at what I'm looking for. But I guess to get a bit more specific,
but even just to interject
please.
there, in regards to presence, which I think is so powerful. Recently, last month, I had the pleasure of going to Rwanda to trek with the gorillas, to see the gorillas,
Wow.
and it's quite a remarkable thing because you go there in the jungle and you try to find the gorillas, and you're there then with this gorilla family and you're hanging out with them. And before I went in, I had some friends who did the experience and also the guide, and they said, make sure to be present because oftentimes people do these bucket list experiences, and they're there on their phone,
Exactly.
just capturing. It's just like, just put your phone away and just sit there and just look at the gorilla in the eye.
Mm.
Just like, just be present with this animal and this almost kind of extinct species. Um, and it taught me so much, as you said, that oftentimes we take for granted how powerful presence is. And as you said, you can be doing all these things and traveling the world and living this great life. However, if you're not present in it, even with that special relationship, you're not experiencing at all. And oftentimes, most of us, as you brought up, I think this is a very important point, we're not present. So I actually want to skip a bit and still hone in on this presence focus of yours.
Mm.
How are you currently approaching cultivating more presence in your life?
It's been a steady practice stroke focus for many years now, but more and more, I think this is the skill that trumps any other skill, if you can even call it a skill, or the quality. Because if you're present in your life, in some ways, the experiences that you asked me about with the previous question, they're secondary to the presence. Because if you're present, everything's fun. Everything's an enjoyable experience. You're here in life experiencing the good, the bad, the hard. Can you be present in grief when someone dies? There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. It's not about, yes, I talk a lot about happiness and I write about happiness, but I think there's a misunderstanding about happiness. Happiness is not having a smile on your face the whole time. If, when dad died and, my mum's not in the best of health, I had to look after mum. I know at some point my mum won't be around anymore. And I don't know what it will feel like to exist in the world without both of my parents. I
Mm.
can't imagine. But when that happens, I want to be present in the grief. I don't want to be distracting from the grief by, looking at Instagram and saying, no, I want to feel it. I want to feel it in every bone in my body that what mum means to me. And then in that situation, what she meant to me while she was alive. In fact, it's crazy to even say those words, given that mum is still alive. So I think presence is more and more what I'm looking for. I've always been very intentional since I became a father of not being on my phone around my children. I'm not perfect, but I think I've always had this thing where I'm like, I don't want my children to grow up. If I just think in front of them, oh, I'm just sending an email, I'm just doing this. If I do that enough times, they're going to get the idea that this device is more important to daddy than we are. So I'm very intentional at home. I will go into a different room to text or use my phone or to do work emails. I will try not to do it in front of them, even though it can be tempting at times. Oh, just do a quick thing here. So I've always tried to be present around my kids. But again, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm thinking about emails and other stuff. So what helps me? Time away from technology helps me. So if I can go for a walk, let's say I go for a 1 hour walk, can I do it and leave my phone at home? Those things are incredible because, look, as a podcast host, I love podcasts, right? At the same time, I think one of the things that is getting in the way of our presence these days is the fact that we're just bombarded with stuff all the time, even good quality stuff. If you're constantly consuming from the outside, you're going to really struggle to be present because you're not paying attention to the signals on the inside. So solitude helps me, gratitude helps me, right? So we were talking before about gratitude and about the questions in your journals. The journal I created with you guys, there's 2 questions of gratitude in there. Gratitude helps you become present because you stop taking things for granted. You have an incredible experience looking at gorillas. You could not even appreciate that because you're thinking about the next experience. So, what am I going to do next time? What holiday am I going to book next time that's going to surpass this? And not even appreciate what is in the moment. So these days, I find the more you practice gratitude, the more you start to see it everywhere. So when I'm on a plane, which I don't get on many planes anymore, like just because my kids are 15 and almost 13, I don't want to be away from them that much. Yes, I love travel, but I also know that the time I've got with them until they're adults is limited. And I want to be with them and enjoy these experiences with them. But I tell you, every time I go on a plane, I'm still amazed. I'm like, for most of our evolution, the fact that we could get on this big metal container and go up in the air is the most wildest thing. Can you imagine telling our ancestors that at some point in the future, you're going to be able to do that? It's the craziest thing that we all just take for granted. People are stressed out at airports. They're stressed out that their drink hasn't come without realizing that just take a seat back for a minute and just go, isn't this amazing? I still can't understand, Alex, I can't understand how planes get in the sky. Honestly. I mean, you can say, oh, you're being a kid at, yeah, maybe I am. I kind of like having
I
this
love that.
childlike curiosity. I'm like, how the hell is this heavy object with all of our suitcases and bags on and all these people going up in the sky? That is being present to the experience of being on a plane, right? So presence comes in, you can look for presence everywhere. How do I cultivate it? Regular practice of gratitude, I find helps. Regular solitude. And in particular at the moment, for the last few months, I've been meditating daily. And it really, really helps. I'm using an app called The Way by the Zen master Henry Shukman, who has got the most wonderful voice. And what I really like about the Way app is that there's no choice. You don't get to look at the whole menu of options and go, what do I feel like today? No. There is a set program. And choice is something, again, I think that gets in the way of presence in the modern world. We think choice is a good thing. Yeah, up to a point. If you give people too many options in any walk of life, they procrastinate and don't take action. A very simple way of thinking about this is Netflix on a Saturday night. I remember a few years ago, when my kids were younger, the kids would go to bed and me and my wife would put on Netflix. We'd try and decide what to watch. Oh my God, 1 hour later, we still haven't decided. We're still trying to find something. And I'm like, this is the paradox of choice. Because there's so many options, it becomes hard to choose. Through a business lens, I think there was a study from recollection a few years ago where a food company, if they offer 28 flavors of a product compared to 3 flavors, sales are completely different. When you offer only 3 flavors, sales are significantly higher, because when it's 28, you're always wondering, did I make the right choice? Maybe not that. Maybe I need that one instead. So what I love about the Way meditation app is that there is no choice. You get down, you commit to the practice, and the app gives you the next stage of your meditation journey. And things is very cleverly designed where you come back around again. So it doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're experienced or you're a novice. But I certainly find meditation a very, very helpful tool to help me become more present. But I guess even going for a walk without nature, meditation, I'd kind of wrap up under the umbrella of solitude. I think for most people in 2025, this is with my kind of 24 years experience as a doctor now, I would say the most important daily practice is a daily practice of solitude. I think the reason why people can't be present, I think the reason why people are struggling, they're rudderless, they're getting confused by all the health advice out there. Which expert should I trust? That expert says this, that expert says that. I think the reason why these things are happening is because we've lost trust in ourselves. We stop listening to ourselves. In my world, Alex, people will fight over the right diet for a human being, right? They'll go, no. This expert says you should be on a low-carb diet. This expert says you should be on a plant-based diet. And people go, well, which expert should I trust? And I say, in 2025, I don't believe that's the right question. It shouldn't be which expert should I trust. It's why do I no longer trust myself? The only way you get to trust yourself, in my view, is by spending time with yourself. But it all links back to presence. If you spend intentional time with yourself each day, journaling, self-reflecting, meditating, you will start to listen to what's going on inside. You will start to hear that voice inside which Because, you're not really living your life at the moment. You're living someone else's life. You'll start to hear the whisper inside when you know you haven't behaved in alignment with the person you know yourself to be. That's another reason why people struggle these days. They struggle with their behaviors, with sugar, with booze, with scrolling Instagram for 3 hours, without realizing that these things are downstream. When there's an internal discomfort within you, when you're not acting in alignment with who you are, that creates a friction inside of you. And that friction will need to be resolved in some way. And often we will resolve that friction with the sugar, with the alcohol, with the overeating, with the online pornography, with the 3 hours scrolling on Instagram. Those things are consequences of us not being present and in touch with ourselves.
There's a beautiful thing about what you just said about we're not spending that time in solitude with ourselves, how important it is to do a practice like journaling. And obviously we collaborated on your beautiful journal, 3-question journal. And before we go to that, I want to take it to what's the reason why Intelligent Change also exists as a company? Why do we create these products? Because in a way, as you know, we kind of innovated the publishing industry with creating these more actionable books of sorts. Yes, we have a little intro of why these questions are important, as in your journal, and then you have the actual daily practice of journaling. And with the age of AI now, what I often refer to Intelligent Changes, we are a human prompting company. Because now we're like with AI, we're excited and we're trying to get all the answers again now from AI. AI, tell me how to live. How should I do this? Am I balanced? We're prompting the AI to give us the answers. However, as you said, the most important answers come from within. We do have this self-guided system of, I believe, our soul. And we don't spend enough time prompting ourselves to the important questions in our lives.
Yeah, the only way to really learn something is to experience it yourself. You never actually learn it from someone else. You think you do, but you don't actually. And let me talk about that through the lens of my job as a doctor for many years. I realized very early on that the patients who truly transform their lives for good, not just for a few weeks, but the ones who transform their lives for good, something really interesting happened. The advice stopped coming from me. It started then coming from them. It started off coming from me. So they would use my expertise, let's say, to help guide them. But they would then pay attention and go, I used to love it, Alex, when patients would come back and say, Dr. Chatterjee, you recommended these 5 things. These 4 work really well for me, but that one doesn't. I want to do this instead. I used to love that, Alex, because I thought, great, this is a patient who's taking control. This is them who's using my guidance as a framework, but then they're experimenting and going, no, this is the right approach for me. It starts off being external and then it becomes internal. And I think that's why, as you say, it's interesting in the world of AI now. We think that AI is going to give us the answers that we need, but it isn't. It may give you guidance, but the real impact, if someone wants to change their life, whether that be health, happiness, more meaning, more purpose, whatever it might be, that only comes from within. More and more, I'm convinced of that. And that's why I think a lot of people go wrong. They've outsourced their inner expertise to external experts. And I say that as a so-called external expert myself. I can't possibly know what the right thing is for any other individual. I can't. It's impossible. I can have a sense of it. I can give them some guidance, but only they will ultimately know the right approach for them. And that's not usually what you hear from doctors, right? It's normally, the way we're trained is that we have the expertise, but I don't think that's true. I think it's a partial truth. It's not about ignoring expertise from so-called experts, but it's marrying that up with your own internal expertise. And that's where I think the products that you guys make, these journals, are so impactful. The other reason why I think your products are so impactful are because they're beautiful, right? So people often ask me, well, these journaling prompts, can I just think about them? Yeah, you could do. I think it would still be impactful. Can you just write them in the notes app on your phone? Yeah, you can do. But I think as the world becomes more and more digital, I think what we need as human beings is more analog. I think human beings are analog beings living more and more in an increasingly digital world. And I've realized that I'm happier in my life the more I embrace analog, the more I write in gorgeous journals that I can feel, right? Because it feels like a practice then that I want to do. Look, if I always say to people, if you can't afford stuff, great, think about these questions. The questions in the journal I create with you, the 3-question journal, I'll give those questions away freely to people. I'm like, I want these questions to help you. Do them in any way that you can. But if you want a journal that's beautiful, that you want to touch and hold, and it makes you want to engage with this practice each day, then sure, there's a journal out there for you. And I think there is also something about investing in something beautiful that's an act of care to myself. We can talk about the benefits of journaling, right? We spend an hour on it. I can quote you research from various labs on the benefits of the benefits of journals. But none of that matters if you don't do it. In fact, when we launched a journal, I did a live event with you guys. Mimi interviewed me. And I remember I said something on stage then, which I don't think I said before. I said, someone asked me about science. Yeah, I remember, the Q&A, someone asked me about science. And I went through some of the scientific studies. And then I said to them, but here's the reality. Someone who journals every day and knows nothing about the science will have way more impact in their life than the person who knows all the science but doesn't journal. And it might sound obvious, but I tell you, Alex, these days they're obsessed with learning about research, learning about science. They think that learning the science has done something. It's done nothing. You may know what journaling does, but the only way to have journaling change your life is to actually journal. You have to take action. And I think action is a thing that people are not taking a lot of the time these days. And that's why they feel stuck.
I love that you said that. The main inspiration for the original 5-minute journal, which has now sold over 3 million copies, which is pretty incredible. And that's, when we started working together, we said, hey, let's create something for you. And we're going to dig deeper into that. However, I think you will love hearing this. The inspiration was, I read this great book called Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. And Shawn Achor, he has one of the best TED Talks of all time, super funny. And he always infuses humor into his talks. And he has this book, he's a Harvard researcher. And his book, Happiness Advantage, really, I would say, summarized a lot of great positive psychology research about gratitude, journaling. And I'm like, this is so great. And there's all this research. And what I realized was, you end this book, and this is what happens to most people that you speak about, you now have all this knowledge about how journaling is scientifically backed, and practicing gratitude is going to make you feel better. And you're like, okay, this is great. And you close it. And then what? Then what?
Exactly.
And this is why we created the 5-minute journal and intelligent change, with this idea that in order to create that intelligent change in your life, it's not just about knowing. It's about actually putting this knowledge into practice, especially doing it daily. And that, I believe that small acts, as you do as well, right? These small acts and practices that we do daily that take us even a few minutes a day compound. And they, most importantly, shape our mindset and the way we then take on the world. That's why, we recommend to do it first thing in the morning and last thing at night, is really this ability that with this mindful practice to be with yourself, to connect with yourself, to connect with this more analog world, not to do it digitally, is then you're really enabling yourself to connect with yourself and then put these things into practice, and then you see that manifest in your life. So with creation of the 3-question journal for yourself, I'm curious about, because when I first approached you, like, hey, with the 5-minute journal, you guys already got things covered. It's a good tool. You have the frameworks, but I said, hey, like I still believe we can do it a little differently in terms of your approach
Yeah.
and your take on this daily practice. So can you walk us through in regards to why was it important to you to choose that format and those questions for yourself and helping people practice that daily?
Yeah. I mean, I have learned so much from seeing tens of thousands of patients. If I would say that my patients have taught me more than I've taught them. Because if you really listen to people, they'll tell you what works, what doesn't work. And I have learned throughout my career that people are busy. People perceive that they don't have time to do things. So if you can inspire them, that's step one, to realize that they should be doing something or they will benefit from doing something. That's step one, but it's not enough because people can have all the inspiration in the world. January the 1st is the prime example. Everyone's got all the inspiration and motivation, but how long does it last? So inspiration is not enough in and of itself. It's useful, it's helpful, but you need something else. You need to make things simple for people and ideally have them not take very long. If you can do that, that approach applies the principles of behavior change, all the research, which is, make something easy if you want to do it regularly. Why do you have to make it easy? Because if you make it hard, you're overly relying on motivation. Motivation comes and goes. It never stays the same in everyone. So if you make the practice you want to bring into your life difficult, you'll do it when your motivation's high, January the 1st, okay? But when your motivation's low, you won't do the behavior if it's difficult. So the way you plan for that is by making the behavior easy. If it's easy, you'll do it when your motivation's high and when your motivation's low. So principle number one is make something easy. Principle number two is you should really stick on that behavior onto an existing habit if you want to maximize your chances of making it succeed in the long term. Are there other ways to do it? Yes, there are other ways, but the research suggests that this is the most effective way for most people. That's what's worked for me. That's what's worked for my patients. And so what you said about the journal and you recommend first thing in the morning, last thing at night, they very much apply those two principles. It's easy, it doesn't take long, and there's a specific time in the day. So it's stuck onto the habit of waking up maybe, or as you make your coffee, you're sitting there with your coffee, you do the journal. That's what I do, okay? It finishes off my own morning routine, which we can talk about if people are interested, but it's the last thing I do. So I guess those are the two core principles I often think of. Well, there's a third core principle I think about as well, which is our environment influences our behavior so much more than we think. So how would that apply through the lens of journaling? Well, keep your journal somewhere visible. If you want to journal last thing at night before you go to bed, make sure the journal is on your bedside table with a pen. If it's in your car, if it's in your study, if it's in a different room, you're creating friction between you and the task that you want to do. So whenever I'm thinking about guiding people to make changes, I'm thinking about those three core principles. And I think journaling totally has those. So when I was thinking about what are the questions I answer myself each day and I found useful and really impactful for my patients, it was really clear what those questions were. And then I apply those three questions onto this methodology to make it more likely that people will stick to it in the long term. Because I wanted to create this journal with you guys to help people change their lives. And I'll tell you, the journal's been out for a couple of years now, maybe. The best bit of feedback I get is when people say, I've never managed to stick to a journaling practice before, but with the 3-question journal, I can. That makes me so happy because that was the goal. So the 3 questions in the morning all have a specific purpose. And it all goes back to this theme of intelligent change. How do you create this intentional life? How are you conscious of the choices that you're making? And how are you conscious and being intentional about the person you wish to be in the world? So we'll come to those things in just a moment. So the first question is, what is one thing I deeply appreciate about my life? I mean, that is just a fantastic way to start each day. It's a simple question of gratitude. What is something I deeply appreciate about my life? It forces you to just pause, not take things for granted, and just go, yeah, you know what? I'm grateful that on this rainy day when it's dark outside and I walked and saw a homeless person earlier on this morning when I went for my morning walk, it makes me really grateful that, you know, I'm in this beautiful apartment now with you, or that I have, the means to have a roof over my family's head and the means to support them with healthy food and nourishment. It sounds so trivial, Alex. People go, yeah, gratitude, what's the big deal? Gratitude's everything. Because otherwise you get sucked into stress and, oh, I've got all these emails to do, this is going wrong. Hey, all that stuff will come. You don't have to worry about that. The day will bring you that anyway. But it's just a beautiful way of starting each morning with a practice of gratitude. And if you want to get into the science, sure, there's so much research showing that a regular practice of gratitude can help with anxiety, depression, focus, productivity, sleep. There's even a great study showing that if you do a practice of gratitude for 5 days, even 3 months later, they can detect a difference in your levels of happiness. Okay, so this stuff is really, really impactful if you do it, right? Not if you listen to it on a podcast, not if you talk about it with your mates, if you actually do it. So question 1, what is one thing I deeply appreciate about my life? Question 2, what is the most important thing I have to do today? Again, probably one of my favorite questions, because in a world where everything feels urgent and important, it forces you, or let me say it another way, it encourages you each morning to make a decision. What is the most important thing I have to do today? That if I get done, counts today as a success. And it gets you really good at decision making the more you practice it. And the thing is, Alex, when people first start asking themselves this question, they get confused sometimes. It's like, wow, well, there's stuff that's important in my work, there's stuff that's important in my home life, with my health. I've got multiple priorities. But recently I learned that the word priority, when it came to the English language in the 1500s, it only existed in its singular form. Okay? You could only have a priority. It did not exist to have multiple priorities, right? This is a modern, I wouldn't say invention, that's a modern twist that we put on that word, which kind of, in many ways, showcases all the problems we have. Everything feels important and urgent, but it isn't. The more you answer this question each day, the more you get clarity on what is truly important. And it's not about having the perfect answer. It's about putting something down. So for some days for me, it will be a work project. The most important thing I have to do today is to meet this deadline for my latest book, whatever. On other days, and this is what it often is actually for me, it is if I'm working from home, it will often be the most important thing I have to do today is make sure when my children come home from school that my laptop is closed, that my phone is in another room, so I can be fully present to listen to what they have to tell me, right? That doesn't mean that my work wasn't important that day, or going for a walk at lunchtime wasn't important that day. It doesn't mean any of that, but it means that I've elevated presence with my children as the most important thing I have to do today. On other days, it will be something like, I was away at the weekend working. I haven't seen my wife properly for a few days. I must make sure tonight, once the kids are in bed, Vid and I sit down and have a cup of tea and properly connect with each other. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the more you answer this question, the better you get at figuring out what is the most important thing. Okay, so that's the second question. And the third question, again, is my favorite. They're all my favorites, Alex, is which quality do I want to showcase to the world today? And all of these questions, but particularly this question, it's such a simple question, but there is such power in it. So much of the time, Alex, we act and behave in a way that's not aligned with who we are. We're reactive, we're not present with people, we maybe snap at someone and afterwards we realize we didn't want to snap at them. And we think that's who we are, but it's not who we are, it's who we became. And you can unbecome that anytime you want. If you start off each day saying, who do I want to be today? So for me, like, which quality do I want to showcase to the world today? I'll often put things down like patience, or compassion or presence or kindness. And what that means is by setting the intention that morning, it means later on in the day, if I'm tempted to be reactive or get annoyed at an email, I'll often go, no, yeah, Rangan, you know what? You said this morning you want to show the world the quality of patience today. So be patient, don't react. And it's just a beautiful question. You do this enough, you do this for a few weeks, you literally change the person who you are. The person who you thought you were suddenly becomes the person who you no longer are. If you put down patience and compassion every morning, you will become more patient. You will become more compassionate just by the act of setting that intention every morning. Now, I don't know if we have time to go into the evening questions or not, but one of the evening questions is, what can I do differently tomorrow? And the 3 evening questions all partner beautifully with the morning questions, right? So there was a real intentional design behind all of those questions. And what can I do differently tomorrow really marries beautifully with that who do I want to be today question. Which quality do I want to showcase to the world today? Because let's say in the morning you say, I want to showcase to the world the quality of compassion today, right? And let's say at lunchtime, you're trying to get to another meeting and you're driving in your car and someone cuts you up and you mouth off, stupid driver, you get really annoyed and tense and you swear at them, right? In the evening, when you answer that question, you go, what can I do differently tomorrow? You can actually reflect to go, you know what, this morning I said I wanted to be compassionate, but I wasn't at lunchtime. Okay, no worries. We're all imperfect humans. We always make mistakes. Tomorrow, I'm really going to focus on demonstrating that quality of compassion. So you bookend both parts of your day with intention, like in your 5-minute journal, but also in this 3-question journal. You set the intentions at the start of the day and you can almost reflect on them at the end of the day, which helps you the day after. And I do this journal every day, okay? I create the journal with you that I wanted in my life, right? That's where I think the best stuff comes from. The best books are written when the author needs to write them for themselves. The best journals come when the creator actually wanted that journal for themselves. And I love it because it's the 3 questions I wanted to ask myself each morning and night, and we put them in that journal together. So I could talk a lot more about those things, but hopefully that gives like a little framework of my thinking.
Oh, for sure. And this is why I was so excited to do that for you. Because oftentimes, as you even said at the beginning, like, hey, you already created the 5-minute journal, and that's kind of like the gold standard. It's fine. I'm like, actually, no. Like, I believe the world would love to still see your take and your iteration of your practice that you journal. The thing that I want to also get your thoughts on, because oftentimes this is what people ask me as well, is like, Alex, it's the same questions
Oh my God.
every day. So like, are you, why do I have to do the same questions every day?
I have a very clear view on this. Okay, so human beings are great at distraction. It's interesting you ask this question, especially through the lens of presence that we've been talking about throughout this conversation, right? So we love to distract ourselves all the time away from presence, right? So if we have an uncomfortable feeling, instead of sitting with that discomfort and feeling that emotion, it's easier to pick up the phone and start scrolling Instagram or getting the chocolate bar out or the sweets or whatever it might be, right? And we can do the same thing with journaling prompts. The reason why I have found with patients and with myself that asking yourself the same questions each day is so powerful is because the repetition forces you to go deeper. If they're different questions each day, you can just, you can do a quick, answer of gratitude. Oh, I'm grateful for my wife, and then crack on, right? Super easy. But you do that for 3 or 4 months, you're not going to keep putting down, I'm grateful for my wife. Well, what about your wife? Oh, well, I'm grateful about the fact that she's always there to support me. I'm grateful for the fact that, whatever, that she brings the best out of me. You go deeper. We know from the scientific research on gratitude that the more specific you get, the better the outcomes anyway. And in a world that's proven to be more and more surface level, and everything we consume online, well, not everything, a lot of the things are very, they're short form, Instagram reels and TikToks, and there is a real power of going deep. Think about that question where I said, which quality do I want to showcase to the world today? You may think, well, I don't have 365 different qualities to showcase to the world for the next 365 days. You don't need to. If you want to be a patient, compassionate, present person in your life, keep reminding yourself of that every morning. And guess what? You're going to become that person. You don't need different stuff each day. The different questions, in many ways, allow us to distract ourselves from going deep. It means we're just going to say surface level on everything. But true change doesn't come from superficiality. It comes from deep introspection. I accept there's a million different ways to journal. We've got to find the right approach for us. But I passionately believe that the repetition in the questions is what gives a lot of the benefits. Because the practice stays the same, any change comes from the practice itself, not from the different questions. And the answers don't have to be the same every day. What is the most important thing I have to do today? One of my morning questions. Well, every day it's going to be different. But the theme is quite good, which is like every day I'm trying to decide with these infinite things I have to do today, what actually is top of the list. So I'm a big fan of repetition. I think repetition gives us depth, and it's depth that creates a long-lasting change.
Yeah. The wonderful thing about this practice that I found, obviously for myself, it changed my life. It's so many other people's as well. And when looking at the original kind of research that I want to include was this part of our brain which calls reticular activating system. And it's often referred to as in these instances. I'm curious to also get your take on it and if it's valid. However, for me, the reason how I'm connecting to the repetition of questions and why it's important to prompt yourself in the morning and the evening, as you said, as you do that enough with this cycle, your life will begin to change and shift, is with this power of our brain and this part of reticular activating system, which is once you write to yourself, hey, what quality do I want to show up as? You're signaling to your brain that, hey, I want to show more compassion. So you're in a way, it's this reticular activating system is this, the way I see it, is this navigation tool to remind yourself of what do you want to focus on, what do you want to see more of in the world, but also in yourself that you want to bring to the world. And with the cycle, you begin to change. I'm curious of your take on it. Is it valid?
Yeah,
Or what other scientific terms help you?
No, basically, what you focus on becomes your reality, right? There is a lot of scientific validity to the reticular activation system, or the RAS, as people abbreviate it. The simple way for people to really get their heads around it is, or certainly what I found is, if you're ever shopping for a car, and you're looking for a red car, and you go to the garage, you look at the red cars, and then for the next week or two, you're on the road, you're seeing red cars everywhere. It's not because there's more red cars on the road. It's simply because your brain has been directed to now focus on red cars. So therefore, you now see the red cars when they always existed out there, but you didn't see them because there's this wider idea that our brain is a filter. There is so much going on right now in this room, outside. If I start to pay attention, wow, I can hear all kinds of noise in the streets. You can hear people, maybe a child. You can hear tires on a wet road. If that was all coming in, I couldn't have a conversation with you now. So my brain is filtering that stuff out so I can be present with you here. All of our brains are constantly doing that. And the brain also sees what's happening and wants to make our life easier, right? So it just repeats what we've previously done. So much of who we are each day is just a repetition of our previous behaviors, right? It's not necessarily who we are, it's who we became. And we do it enough times, that literally is who you are. If you practice stress every day, you know what? You get really good at stress and you become stressed. If you practice gratitude and compassion and intention every day, well, those are the things that you start to bring into your life. There is so much scientific validity to this. And I think it's very, very empowering for people. It's all about your attention. Where are you directing your attention? There is this whole totality, this multi-dimensional experience of life. We could experience many different facets of life, but it depends what you're focusing on. You can't experience it all. You'd be overwhelmed. So I love it. I think that bit of research on the RAS really helps us, and it reinforces why a journaling practice with these really directed, with these real, these questions that help to direct your thoughts. That's one of the reasons why they're so powerful.
Yeah, and to finish on a note on journaling, and we're going to come back to the question you haven't answered before, which is what do you want to actualize in your life? The wrapper for this, as you said, is how we design the products with intelligent change. Is that, as you said, we want to make it beautiful, and we want to make it simple. That is something that you want to interact with each day. Recently, I had Dan Murray, who's the founder of Heights, and the way they designed their package, they made sure that it's something that it's a supplement that you'll actually want to have out of the cupboard, that you'll actually use. Because as you said, design is very important, because if it's something that is not aesthetically pleasing to us, we want to hide it away. But we want to create products that we as people actually want to show off. And this is why for us, even in regards to designing, let's say the 3-question journal for you, we want to follow the same principles of beauty, of simplicity, of something that even just looking at it brings you that sense of zen and peace, and gets you, even without interacting with it, you already start thinking of the 3 questions. And that's also the power of design. So now, taking you back to this question, or we're going back to really this idea of how death and confronting that in our lives, and confronting also that we don't have that many years left. As you said, we don't have that many summers with our kids left. We don't have that many summers or even days with our parents left. And if we think of life just, it's never going to end, we're never going to actually do the important things in our lives. So for yourself, as you kind of have now more time to absorb maybe the question, what is it in the years remaining that you have that you want to actualize and experience outside of the presence, right, that you said? Is there anything else? Because you've now, as you said, 6 best-selling books, you have this incredible podcast that all started with this idea of like, I want to be more aligned and living to my authentic purpose in my life, what I want to experience. And you've done so much in the last decade or so. In the years remaining, what else is remaining for you?
It's a great question that is rolling around my brain. And clearly there's going to be things that I can't even possibly imagine in the future that I will want to experience that I don't even know about now. But as I sit here today, I guess as you say that, the thing that really comes up for me, Alex, is I want to experience everything. And what I mean by that is I don't want to progress through the next few years and decades wishing I had done something that I didn't. So music has always been a very important part of my life. I played multiple instruments. I played in bands for years. I took a year and a half off medicine in my 20s and recorded a solo EP and toured it around the UK. I think I'm getting this itch within me for the last few years where I realize actually that's a part of me that I've let fall by the wayside, which is okay. Things happen. Career has taken off in a certain way. I've become a father. There's only so many things you can do in life. And I also really understand that there are different seasons to life. You can't do everything, okay? There is a time and a place for everything. But I really feel now, as my children are getting older, 15 and almost 13, they're less dependent on my wife and I compared to, let's say, 5-10 years ago, right? I'm really thinking about, well, maybe it's time to record that solo album that I had half started 15, 20 years ago. Maybe it's time to really re-engage with that part of my soul, which is important. I mean, music is a huge part of me. And what's really interesting, Alex, you're asking this question at a very interesting time for me. Literally 2 days ago on my podcast was a very unusual episode. I spoke to my childhood hero on my show. And my childhood hero was John Bon Jovi. Now, when I say hero, let me just provide some context. I had a life-sized flag of John Bon Jovi on my bedroom wall. I literally idolized him. I thought he was the coolest guy on the planet. I literally wanted to be him. I grew my hair like him. I dressed like him. I wore cowboy boots like him. I've seen Bon Jovi 33 times in concert. So when the opportunity came up to talk to him on my show about 3 weeks ago, I had to take it. And it was really interesting because it was a wonderful experience. He was lovely. We had a great time. People are loving the conversation. But what's really interesting for me is since that conversation with John, I picked up my guitar more and I'm writing songs again. I've got the start to 4 songs just in the last 4 days. I keep coming up with new ideas now. And I kind of feel, Alex, there's a part of me, the boy inside of me, maybe had been locked away for the last couple of decades while I was busy doing other stuff, taking care of my dad, raising a family, pursuing my passion in my career. But I kind of feel that there's a part of me that's been woken up again. And so I want to experience, I've thought about this for a few years, but I really, really, over the next year or two, I want to write an album worth of songs and then get in a studio with my band, with my friends, and actually just sit there for 2 or 3 weeks and just cut an album. Not for any external validation, right? Because I want to do it. I know I can write really good songs. I want to go into the studio, record them. And again, not for external validation is key because there's a wider theme in that question. What do I want to experience? So much of what we want to experience these days, or what we think we want to experience, is done through the lens of external validation. What will this say about me? What can I do that I can then post about, that people will say nice things about? That's dangerous because you start to change who you are or what you desire because of what you think the validation is going to be on the other side. And one thing I want to experience more and more is true authenticity, which is about what do I really want to do? What does my heart and soul want to do? I want to experience again what it's like to sit in a studio for 2 to 3 weeks and creating an album. I've done a lot of that in my 20s, but I haven't done it in years. That's one thing I want to experience. The other thing I want to experience more and more of is I love being in front of people and trying to inspire them. And I did a national tour in the UK this year. Did 16 shows. It's about 20,000 people came, 25,000 people, something like that across all of them. People loved it. I loved it. Really kind of immersive, transformative experience of people in person. And I want to experience more of that collective effervescence where people come together in a room and share purpose, energy, and joy. I think I've got a skill at doing that. I think people really respond well to it. And I want to experience more of that. And so I'm trying to figure out at the moment, how can I do that? Is it more live shows? Is it in-person retreats where you transform people over 3 days? I'm trying to figure out how do I want to do that more. And here's the other thing, Alex. Because I'm thinking about a retreat at the moment for next year. And you know what goes on in my head? And this is my conditioning. Is, yeah, but an in-person retreat it'll be quite expensive. So what will people think? What will people think? That's such a dangerous question. It's such a potentially disabling question because worrying too much about what people think gets in the way of us living our lives. And I was thinking about this morning on the way to your house, actually. I was thinking, does it matter what people think? Does it? I mean, does it really matter? If I want to do this, if I think it's going to be an amazing experience for people, and yes, by virtue of it being an in-person, intense retreat, it's not going to be for everyone. Can I be okay with that? As a doctor who wants to really help everyone, can I be okay with that? And I think, yeah, I can be okay with that because that's just the world. Not everything is for everyone. I don't know if I'm making sense or going off on a tangent or
No,
not.
no, no, you're totally making sense. And the way to connect it all is to the question, to the point that we spoke about regarding death. And that quote by
Exactly.
Steve Jobs that I read, which he said is that, death is the best, thing there is because it makes you realize you have nothing to lose.
It's lose.
And as you said about, thinking of others, you're like, well, I have this reputation. What will people think if I start recording album and recording this type of music? I'm known as a doctor and holistic health, and maybe my lyrics are about totally something that. What will people think? And again, this is the reason why with Intelligent Change in our product, the Life Designer, this is the first exercise. Because once you confront your mortality, once you actually meditate and think about death, the great Stoics, amor fati,
Exactly.
it's just it's such an important reality of our lives that many choose to just kind of like hide, or like, oh, I don't want it. I'll think about it as I get older or things like that. However, we have to think about it now. So everything that you're saying, everything you said about recording album or doing more of the tour or doing a retreat, but potentially having doubts, maybe how it's going to be priced or what people think. It shows the humanness
Exactly.
of you, and that's what I've realized, and I'm curious even what you realize because you've now interviewed legends, idols, who, as you said, Jovi, who you've admired and was a huge inspiration to you, but now you've come across and you spoke to these people as humans.
Yeah.
And what I had also the pleasure of, sitting down with people like you or hosting incredible guests at the summit and the retreat that I hosted in Ibiza for the last 3 years. And I realized, meeting these legends, billionaires, everyone is human.
Yeah.
Everyone has their fears, doubts, and regrets. So even so for yourself, as we kind of wrap this up, you've interviewed so many of these people. What has been your learning about these some people, we think these people are not real, but they are.
Yeah.
So what did you learn about them?
Well,
That connected to yourself.
It's really interesting having this conversation right now because I'm literally still processing my conversation with John Bon Jovi. I actually, Alex, don't really get nervous for most conversations.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident in what I do. I understand that everyone's human. We're all imperfect. I was nervous with John because I literally idolized him as a kid.
Yeah.
But it's been very therapeutic seeing him because what's really interesting is that in chapter 2 of my last book, Make Change It Lasts, there's a the chapter is called Give Up Your Heroes. And I actually start off by writing about John Bon Jovi. I actually read it to John in the podcast, which is crazy. But what I say in that chapter is that heroes are not real, at least not in the way that you think they are. All you are ever seeing is one aspect of someone's life, not the totality of it. So I hypothesize in that chapter, for all those years that I looked up to John Bon Jovi, I thought, I just saw the glamorous side of his life, the being on stage, the singing these wonderful songs, the stadium concerts, whatever it might be. I didn't see the other side. The other side being, what was it like to be away from your family on these 240 show world tours, sleeping in a tour bus, smelly tour buses, being on the road, being away from home, being away from your kids. There was a real cost. And we all do that with all these people that we look up to. We get seduced by the one side that we're shown on social media, or we see their achievements. I've met and hung out with enough people over the last years who people would regard as successful, or a lot of so-called influencers. And I realize a lot of these people are not that happy. They're not contented. And the crazy thing is people are looking up to them and thinking that they are. But a lot of people who are in the public eye, not everyone, a lot of them thought the validation that they got from the fame would somehow make up for the feeling of a lack inside, but it doesn't. It just made it worse. So I've seen that, right? And I feel, it really helps me when I see that, because it reminds me that actually, when you get sucked into comparison, you remind yourself with gratitude what you already have. You go, look, I'm very lucky. What am I grateful for? Well, I'm grateful for the life I have. I do a job that I literally love and that I know makes a positive impact on millions of people around the world. That's fantastic. I've been married for 18 years. I have a great relationship with my wife. I've got 2 kids who I spend a lot of time with, who love hanging out with me. And as you know from even trying to get me to the summit the last years, I put my family time above everything. I will say no to so much of what sounds great because I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my family. So I feel the more of these so-called influential people I've met, the more it's reminded me that everyone's struggling and actually don't get sucked into that world. Stay focused, understand what's important, make sure that none of that is coming at the expense of my relationships. And also, just to finish off that thought on heroes, one thing I put in that chapter, which was really reinforced when I actually did meet my boyhood hero here in London a few weeks ago, was I said in that chapter that we think our heroes are people that we want to be. Oh man, if I could be that person, I'd be so happy. I don't think that's what it is. I think when we idolize someone or hero worship someone, all that it is that we see something in them that we know we have within us. And I explored that when John Bon Jovi came onto my show. And literally, I honestly think that's what I saw in them. I saw someone who was optimistic, who was always positive, who had this real self-belief. I saw that in me because that's what I've got. And funnily enough, he saw the same thing in Bruce Springsteen, his idol. Now he's really good mates with Bruce. And what he said to me is, I realized now that I'm friends with Bruce, I realized he's a family guy struggling with it all like the rest of us. And he said that really helps him. And so I think I've learned many things over the years on my podcast. I shared with you what I learned from Edith Eger before, which was a life-changing conversation for me. But even this latest conversation with John Bon Jovi has really been impactful for me, because for me to see my ultimate childhood hero and realize that he's also just a human like the rest of us, trying to make sense of the world, trying to get by, dealing with the ups and downs of family life. We're all just doing the best that we can.
Beautiful. We're about to wrap it up. There's 2 questions left. One of them is, as you said, with your latest book, Making Change That Lasts. If you would summarize that to people, how can they make, and we kind of started on that theme of intelligent change. As we go here and everything that you know, how can someone listening or watching us right now make changes that actually last in their life? And I'm sure they can read the whole book, but if
the two big things I'd say are, number one, you got to spend time with yourself each day to start listening to yourself. We've covered that already through the lens of solitude. You will never know how to change your life or what's working, what's not working, if you're constantly consuming content and things from the outside. You have to have a regular practice of solitude, number one. And the other big idea I would say is that you have to look at your underlying belief systems, because your behaviors will always fall back to the level of your beliefs. Always. You can change your life for a few weeks, maybe a few months, but if you haven't updated your belief systems on who you are and what you can do and your identity, you will always revert back, which is why most people can't make change that lasts. It's because it's too superficial. Oh, I want to change my diet. I want to cut back on alcohol, without understanding, what role does alcohol play in your life, right? If stress is driving your alcohol intake, you can try and white knuckle it for a few weeks and cut back, But if the stress levels in your life stay the same, that's going to keep, you're going to go back to the alcohol, or you need to find an alternative behavior to alcohol to manage the stress. People focus too much on the behavior without understanding what's actually going on behind the behavior. If you get behind your behaviors, that's where the gold is. And what's often behind our behaviors is our belief systems. So those are the two big ideas that I would say for people to reflect on. If they want more, sure, check out the book, Make Change It Lasts,
Yeah.
to get more. But those are, if they just meditate on those ideas, I think that will be impactful for them.
Yeah, I think overall this conversation that we had, there's so many nuggets there. I'll be re-listening myself and we'll be resharing with people. The last question is a fun one, and it's impromptu. It's from our Get Closer deck. So there's 3 levels, right? There's close, closer, and closest, depending by color. And you can choose a question. I don't know what's gonna come up, but you can choose a question by category and see what comes up.
Okay, well, I'm drawn to green for some reason.
Yeah, green's
so
good.
I'm just going to pick green, somewhere in the middle. Just pick something out.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. What makes you smile? When my kids say, Daddy, I love you.
Oh.
I don't think there's anything, honestly, I don't think there's anything that lights me up inside more than that. It is, for any parents, you're a parent, for any parents, that's it. I never get tired of hearing that. When my daughter looks at me and says, Daddy, I love you, that makes me smile, not just here on the outside, but in the entirety of my being just lights up. So yeah, when my kids say, Daddy, I love you.
Oh, so beautiful. Oh, Rangan, thank you so much for your presence, for your time here with us, I'm very grateful for us co-creating such a beautiful journal, the 3-question journal with you, and that is helping thousands of people around the world. And it's becoming part of people's daily practice. I'm sure we can have a way longer conversation. So I think a part 2 is deserved in the
Would love
future,
to.
in a beautiful setting, in a beautiful location.
Let's do it in the summer.
Yeah, and let's do it in the summer outside. That'll be really great. And yeah, so I just want to thank you for being part of the intelligent change. Thank you for creating intelligent change in your life and in other people's lives. Thank you so much.
Alex, I've absolutely loved it. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you so much.